Ready when you are. Oh. We are ready.
All right, good evening, everyone. We have a couple of short meetings to dispense with before we get to the main event. So if you're joining us and you wish to speak at public comment during our regular city council meeting, just wait a moment and I will signal you when that time is, and then you can go ahead and raise your hands and you'll be recognized if you have not already submitted an online speaker card at emeryville.org. So the time is 7:38 p.m. We're running just a little bit behind, but I will go ahead and call to order the City of Emeryville Management of Emeryville Services Authority meeting. Again, at 7:38 p.m. Today is Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. And please bear with me while I read some introductory remarks. I'd like to state for the record that this meeting is being conducted by teleconference pursuant to newly enacted Bill 361. The city was previously complying with the Brown Act orders issued by the governor, which were aimed at containing the novel coronavirus and which expired on September 30th. This new bill gives local agencies the authority to continue to host virtual meetings until January 1st, 2024, as long as California is under a governor-declared state of emergency. In order to continue meetings subject to this exemption to the Brown Act, the City Council must make the following findings by majority vote no later than 30 days after it starts using the exemption and every 30 days thereafter. The legislative body has reconsidered the circumstances of the state of emergency and either 1, the state of emergency continues to directly impact the ability of members to meet safely in person, or 2, state or local officials continue to impose or recommend measures to promote social distancing. The City Council, successor agency, and Mesa Board all considered these findings at our November 2, 2021 regular meetings, and will consider them again every 30 days thereafter until the governor lifts the state of emergency. City Hall is open to the public during regular business hours, 9 a.m. to 5 p.m., Monday through Friday. Please check the website for planning and building counter special hours or to make an appointment. The agenda states that the public may view the meeting that is being live streamed online and on ETV Channel 27 and provide comment by submitting an online comment form, which will then be read into the record by staff. The comment form can be accessed by going to our main City of Emeryville website at emeryville.org and clicking on Council Agendas and Videos. Once there, you will see a link entitled Submit an Online Speaker Card. The public also has the option of participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom and may provide public comment during the meeting using the raise hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press star 9. The Zoom call-in information was provided on the posted agenda as well as via e-notification and on social media. At this time, I will ask our clerk to please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Here.
Councilmember Medina.
Present.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Here.
And Mayor Martinez.
Here. Next up is approval of the final agenda. Do I have a motion and a second?
So moved.
Second.
I have a motion from Member Medina, a second from Vice Mayor Donahue. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. Colleagues, are there any ex parte communications on this agenda? Seeing none, and now is the time for public comment. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you're participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press star 9. At this time, I will ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hand to make audio comments.
No online comment cards and no raised hands. Oh, nope. It blinked on and off. I think not yet. Oh.
I think that she might just not understand how to keep it on. She keeps double clicking it maybe, so maybe we should just ask her.
Yes,
Ms. Montgomery, did you wish to speak right now, or did you want to wait till the regular council meeting? And you're on mute at the moment.
Hello, can you hear me?
Yes.
Yes.
Yeah, let me know when's the best time to speak. I thought this was the time. I did submit something in the notes, but evidently you don't have them, so I would read them. Is that right?
I do have your note, and we just
Okay.
want to make sure we place it in the right portion of the meeting. And then
Okay.
either I can read it
Let me know
for you,
when
or
that
you-
is, and I can wait. I don't want to interrupt the process.
Very good. So we are going to just finish up this special meeting of the management of Emeryville Services Authority. Then we will have a brief meeting for the successor agency to the redevelopment agency. Then the regular city council meeting will be shortly thereafter that. And I will make another announcement at that time that anyone wishing to make just general comments to the city council will have ample opportunity to do so at that time. So if you're able to, Ms. Montgomery, you can, take down the raise hand feature. And seeing no further public comment for the Mason meeting, I will entertain a motion and a second for the consent calendar.
I move consent.
I second the motion.
Okay, we have a motion by Member Medina, a second by Member Bowders. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders,
Aye.
Councilmember Medina,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue,
Aye.
and Mayor Martinez.
Aye. There are no action items for this meeting, so this meeting is adjourned at 7:45 p.m. I will wait for the green light to begin the very brief successor agency to the redevelopment agency meeting.
One moment. Okay, all set.
Okay, very good. Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. The time is 7:45 p.m. I am calling to order the City of Emeryville as successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency meeting. Today is still Tuesday, November 16th. Please take the announcements that I made earlier as still true. And please forgive me, there's no second page to my agenda, so I need to pull this up again online. But we are all still here. This meeting is called to order. Colleagues, do I have a motion and a second for approval of the final agenda?
I move to approve the final agenda.
Second.
Motion by Member Medina, second by Member Donahue. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders,
Aye.
Councilmember Medina,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue,
Aye.
and Mayor Martinez.
Aye. And are there any ex parte communications to report for this meeting? None from myself either. Now is the time for public comment, and this is, again, I'm just going to put this out there. This is only for the Emeryville as successor agency to the Emeryville Redevelopment Agency. So if you have public comments at this time, it is should be within purview of that agency. So, Ms. Montgomery, your hand is raised still. Do you have comments for this meeting?
My hand says lower on my side. Sorry about that.
That's okay. Lower is what you're able to do. There you go. Now your hand is down. All right. I'll turn to the city clerk to see if anyone has submitted electronic comment to the successor agency to the redevelopment agency.
They have not.
Very good. At this time, I will close public comment and I will entertain a motion and a second on the consent calendar.
Madam Chair, I move the consent calendar.
May I second it?
I have a motion from Member Bowders and a second from Member Medina. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders,
Aye.
Councilmember Medina,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue,
Aye.
and Mayor Martinez.
Aye. That passes unanimously. And there are no action items for this meeting, so this meeting is adjourned at 7:47 p.m. And when our clerk tells me they are ready, we will move on to the main event.
are ready.
Okay, very good. The time is 7:48 p.m. Good evening, everyone. I am calling to order the City of Emeryville City Council meeting for Tuesday, November 16th, 2021. Madam City Clerk, may I presume that our roll call still stands?
Yes, you may.
Okay, thank you. And in that case, our introductory remarks regarding the Brown Act stand as well. For item 3, approval of the final agenda, colleagues, if you will indulge me, I hope we can adjourn tonight in memory of Wilma Chan and observe a short moment of silence at that time. And with that, I will move approval of the final agenda with that amendment.
Second the mayor's motion.
Okay, thank you. There's a motion from myself, a second from Member Bowders. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders,
Aye.
Councilmember Medina,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue,
Aye.
and Mayor Martinez.
Aye. There are no special orders of the day. Next up is announcement of commission and committee vacancy.
Good evening, Mayor and council members. Just briefly tonight, I've been announcing that we have an open recruitment, and I'm going to announce it more fervently because we have received no applicants for any of these 4 vacancies. We've got a resident opening on the Mosquito Abatement District. We've got a business representative opening on the Budget Advisory Committee. We've got a community member opening on the Commission on Aging and a business rep or resident for the Public Art Committee. So please go online and submit your applications by Monday, November 22nd. And the appointments, should there be some to be made, will be made at the December 21st City Council meeting. Thank you.
Thank you, Madam Clerk. Next up, we have council member special announcements and reports on meeting attendance. Does anyone have anything that they'd like to report? Member Bowders?
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I just wanted to report out that I had the honor and privilege of representing California on the United States delegation to the United Nations Climate Action Summit in Glasgow, Scotland. I was there for the last 9 days, and happy to speak to any member of the Emeryville community who would like to learn more about what transpired at COP26. In a nutshell, I had the opportunity to actually give a presentation to an international audience on the work California is doing to achieve regulatory emissions reductions through a equity lens, and talk about the role redlining, urban renewal, and other environmental justice oriented racist policies from our past have implicated the way we are working with community to build a more sustainable and healthy future in California. I was able to sit in and observe negotiations while I was there. I attended quite a number of panels and conferences, and I learned a great deal of things, a number of things there. I'm going to actually write something up about this to share with the community. And if you are interested in, my way of trying to give Bay Area residents access to this was the Air District, whether it was prudent or not, gave me access to all their social media handles. And while I was there, I live tweeted some things, but I also did several interviews that were posted on the Air District's Facebook page. They're about between 10 and 15 minutes of length each. I interviewed the former chair of the California Air Resources Board, the former chair and Emeryville resident of the California Water Board, who lives in the Bessler building, by the way. I interviewed a 16-year-old indigenous youth from California who's representing a series of Native American tribes, and I also interviewed Assemblymember Friedman, the chair of our Transportation Committee. It's really worth going to Facebook and looking at Bay Area Air District is the handle, and taking less than an hour, you can watch all 4 of them and listen to 4 completely fascinating and extraordinary women talk about their role in helping address climate change here in Northern California. And again, just be happy to talk to anybody who wants to learn more about what's going on in that space.
Great, thank you, Councilmember Bowders, for traveling to Glasgow on behalf of all Californians. Colleagues, any other reports? Okay, that'll move us to our city manager's report, and I think we have an exciting event, perhaps, that you can tell us about.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. Yes, we are thrilled as of this afternoon to be able to let you know that the long-awaited opening of the South Bayfront Bridge is scheduled for the evening of December 3rd. We are going to have a very festive celebration that night with our holiday parade. Our traditional holiday parade and tree lighting will start here at Town Hall at 5:30 for the tree lighting, and then parade over to the bridge, have a ribbon cutting there, and Bay Street will be hosting a celebration on the other side of the bridge. So we're very excited. I'm really, really grateful to Gelati and the entire construction team. There is still work being done. It is not completed yet, but we have been told that the last remaining punch list items should be completed in time for us to meet this date. So it is not open yet. We are still finishing it up, but we are planning that big celebration for the evening of the 3rd. So we really welcome everybody to join us.
Great, can't wait to be there. So everyone stay off the bridge until that opening day on December 3rd, and then you go walk past the cut ribbon. So very good, thank you, Madam City Manager. Now we're up for ex parte communications. Does anyone have anything to report for this meeting? Okay, seeing none, we will move on. Now is the time for public comment for our regular city council meeting. Anyone who wishes to make comments related to items not on the agenda or on the consent agenda should have submitted your online speaker card by now. 3 minutes will be allowed for the city clerk to read your comments into the record. If you are participating in tonight's meeting via Zoom, please use the raise your hand feature visible on your screen, or if you're calling in, press *9. At this time, I will ask the city clerk whether any comments have been received via the online comment card or whether anyone has raised their hand to make audio comments. And we do recognize Elizabeth Montgomery. And just let us know if you have a preference of the clerk reading your submitted comments or if you'd like to speak at this time. And clerk, go ahead and unmute the speaker.
Yeah, I think it'd be good if the clerk could read. That would be great. I'd appreciate that.
All right.
Very good. We're going to put you on mute and allow the clerk to locate those comments.
Okay. Okay, comment from Elizabeth Montgomery. I wish to comment about enacting an Emeryville Code of Ethics and Conduct. The City of Emeryville needs to immediately enact a code of ethics and conduct befitting of a thriving modern political and civic institution. There are hundreds of examples throughout the state of California to assist us with this vital task. The Code of Ethics and Conduct will guide the behavior of city officials and staff when faced with ethical questions and dilemmas. It will train the city government officials and staff in fundamental civic engagement with residents, allowing residents to gain more confidence in our government. According to current research, the new Code of Ethics and Conduct should also train the city council members and staff in online social media, fueling anger and resentment more than positive civic and social values. The hallmarks
that was a typo, sir.
The hallmarks of Emeryville's Code of Ethics and Conduct will build transparency, support diversity of opinions and representation within our committees and structures, avoid corruption, help evaluate potential candidates, and create a more just city as an example for our children. Emeryville comprises a unique mix of artists and developers where urban farmers mix with high-tech companies, all contributing to our city, school district, council committees, and organizations that support Emeryville citizens. To maintain diversity in solving our challenges as a city, we need to honor an agreed-upon political democratic process. Now more than ever, reviewing our common goals and agreements can advance our city. Support the enactment of an Emeryville Code of Ethics and Conduct.
Thank you, Terry. I see another public speaker with a hand raised.
All right, one moment. Okay. Recognizing Ken Bukowski, go ahead, please. You'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yes.
Well, I'll be happy to be on hand for the December 3rd opening of the bridge. I remember when we started that project, it was a long time ago, and I'm just looking forward to it. Thank you.
Very good. Thank you, Mr. Bukowski. I will just note for the previous public speaker that per Assembly Bill 1234, all of the city council attends regular biannual training in ethics So you can look to fppc.ca.gov to learn more about that. And we can now move on.
There is one more raised hand, Madam Mayor.
Sure thing. Let's recognize that person for 3 minutes.
Go ahead, please. You have 3 minutes.
Okay, back several years ago, when the Sherwin-Williams project was approved, the city of Emeryville assured the community that the project was going to deliver on labor issues. Specifically, the construction of the project would be done with prevailing union wages, we were told. So just the citizens were told, accept this project and you'll get prevailing union wages for the project, for the construction of the project, as a way to stop people from galvanizing against the project, I suppose. Maybe the council also likes prevailing union wages, but regardless, that was what was promised to us. And then what do we get now? Now that the project is being worked on, subcontractors screwing over their workers, paying less than the agreed to amount that the city promised, which is prevailing union wages. Right now, there's a labor dispute going on and a protest out in front of Sherwin-Williams by the Carpenters Union local, and I don't know what the number is, but they are alerting us to that 2 subcontractors are screwing over their workers and not paying the agreed upon prevailing union wages at Sherwin-Williams. So who's the community, specifically this community member, angry at about this? Not the subcontractors, they're just slimeball construction firm. I'm not angry at Lennar. They're liars. They're big, giant, and ginormous development corporation. They lie. That's what they do. They lie to us. So I'm not angry with Lennar. I'm not angry with the slimeball subcontractors screwing their workers. I'm angry at the city of Emeryville, who promised that this wouldn't happen, and now sure enough it's happened. What are you going to do about it? You have to make these workers whole. That's what you promised. Not only do you have to make sure that they're paid what was promised, which is the prevailing wage, you also have to pay their back wages. Maybe you're going to have to pull it out of the general fund to make these workers whole. I'm not going to sit by idly and let my city screw over workers like this when you promised us if we get this project, you wouldn't do that. You have to make these workers that are being screwed over by these slimeball construction firms, you have to make them whole. What are you going to do about it? Are you going to do it? Are you going to make them whole? Or are you just going to move on?
All right, seeing no more raised hands, we will go ahead and conclude public comment and move to the consent agenda. Colleagues, if you don't have any questions or anything that you need to discuss from the consent agenda, I'd be happy to entertain a motion in a second.
Move the consent agenda.
I'll second.
Motion from Member Bowders, second from Member Medina. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Aye. Next up, we've got public hearings. So this, item 11.1, is a second reading of an ordinance of the City Council of the City of Emeryville adding to Section 6-4.25 Organics Reduction and Recycling. Do we have a staff report on this item? I know this is just a second reading, so we've heard this before. Member Bowders.
I was going to request to waive staff presentation.
Very good. Does everyone agree that we have heard this item already? Yes, we have. But thank you for staying up late with us, Matt Anderson. We see you. Are there any?
You bike to work every day. We love that.
Are there any questions for Matt before we turn to public comment? Okay, seeing none, I would like to ask our city clerk. First of all, this is a public hearing, so at 8:02 p.m., I'm going to open the public hearing, and I will ask our city clerk whether anyone has submitted electronic comment or whether anyone has their hand raised in Zoom, or if you're calling in, please use *9 to raise your hand in Zoom. Madam Clerk?
I have no online speaker cards and no raised hands at this time.
All right, and just double checking the attendees list. If anyone is really interested in organics reduction and recycling, and seeing no raised hands and having no electronic comments, we will go ahead and close the public hearing at 8:03 p.m. and bring it back to my colleagues for discussion, or if they wish, a motion.
Motion to read by title only.
Do we need to do that on second reading?
We do not. You read it by title only at your previous meeting.
Okay. Would you like to amend your motion?
Sure, I'll make a motion to approve the ordinance at second reading.
Very good. We have a motion by Member Bowders, a second by Member Medina. Please call the roll.
Councilmember Bowders.
Aye.
Councilmember Medina.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Donahue.
Aye.
And Mayor Martinez.
Thank you, Matt, for biking all this way. Next up, we have an action item. This is item 12.1. It is the 2023-2031, those are odd years, housing element. And here to present, I see we've been joined by Navarre Oaks.
Yeah, good evening, Mayor. Good evening, Council. So for tonight, staff is working to update the current housing element and to cover the next housing element, as you said, from 2023 to 2031. And the city has hired the firm PlaceWorks to prepare and update the housing element, and draft is currently underway for that. So Nicole West from PlaceWorks will be providing you with a presentation tonight discussing that process and the requirements of it. Something that's not discussed in tonight's presentation or in the staff report you've been provided is the city pursuing a pro-housing designation. The pro-housing designation program provides incentives in the form of additional points or other preferences in the scoring of competitive housing, community development, and infrastructure programs. So becoming a pro-housing jurisdiction is achieved by submitting an application to HCD. The application is a point-based system, and it demonstrates that the city's planning is consistent with state priorities and that the city has the ability to increase residential development capacity. Staff and the city's consultant are still analyzing how the city's planning regulations and housing element align with the state's requirements for pro-housing. And staff recommends the council hold a separate study session shortly after the new year to review pro-housing requirements and provide direction to staff on pursuing the pro-housing designation. And so at the end of this presentation, we have an opportunity to talk about this when we talk about scheduling and next steps for the housing element. But I wanted to give a preface with that this evening. And I'll have Nicole West take it away from here. Thank you so much.
Good evening. Can you hear me?
Yes, we can hear you, Nicole. Thank you.
Okay, great. All right. Greetings, council members. I am happy to be with you tonight to talk about the housing element. Next slide, please. First, we will just kind of I'll introduce myself and then talk about the housing element, give an overview of it, and we'll talk about the project schedule and get to your questions and comments after that. Next slide, please. You can go ahead. I'm here, Nicole West is my name, and I'm from PlaceWorks, and I'm flying solo tonight. I know at the Planning Commission, my colleague Jennifer Gastelum gave a presentation, and Allison Homestead, my other colleague, was there as well. So let's see, overview of the housing element. There'll be a lot of technical information in my presentation. This process can be very complicated, especially if you haven't been involved in a previous housing element update. And even if you have been involved in a previous housing element update, there are new laws being passed year after year that are really changing the landscape given the statewide housing crisis that we're in. But the housing team at PlaceWorks has been assisting jurisdictions across the state with these for many years. So we're here to guide you through the process and make sure that no details are slipping through the cracks. Next slide, please. So this is one of the required elements of the general plan. And it's one that actually the State Housing and Community Development Department, or HCD, has to actually review for compliance. And they set the schedule as well, which I'll talk about more as we proceed. The review process is iterative, so we will have a round of review initially, and then we'll get comments from HCD and we'll address those comments with revisions to the document. And then after the city adopts the document, it goes back to them for a certification review. And then after that, the city will have a certified housing element for the 6th cycle. So the previous cycle, the 5th cycle, is still actually in effect right now, and I'll show you those dates coming up. But the big take-home message is that the housing element is a plan for accommodating a jurisdiction's fair share of the regional housing need. We'll get into that in detail as well. Next slide, please. So we have a robust public participation component in this project. We have a website with a lot of information posted. There's a couple surveys that have been open to the public. We're also interviewing stakeholders, and those we selected the interviewees based on them representing different socioeconomic groups. We're interviewing different service providers, organizations that help homeless individuals or provide other kinds of assistance, as well as agencies that field fair housing complaints. And we're incorporating all of that feedback into the document. We have community workshops. We've had one so far, and actually at the end of the presentation, I'll show you a little more detail on some of these, what we've done so far, and the dates of some upcoming public participation events. We also have been meeting with the Housing Committee. We've had 3 meetings so far and have 3 more scheduled. We met with the Planning Commission once so far and with you tonight, and then there will be additional meetings coming up also with the Planning Commission and with you to go over the public review draft document when that is compiled, and then additionally after that for adopting the document. We wanted to make sure that we're really getting the word out about the opportunity to participate and provide input, and so the community workshop invitations and public review draft release announcements will be going out via social media, email notification, and also with physical posters and flyers distributed in places where people are less likely to have access to digital media, so that we can make sure that we're trying to hear all the different voices in the community. Next slide, please. All right, so as I mentioned, this is a state mandated schedule, and the city currently has a certified housing element that will remain in effect until January 31st of 2023. The adoption deadline for the 6th cycle housing element might sound far away. You see January 31st, 2023, but these documents do take a while to develop, including a lot of coordination with staff and with the public. Let's see, next slide, please. So the components of the housing element include an analysis of existing and projected housing needs, and we do a very thorough demographic review using a lot of different data. The ABAG prepares a data packet, and then HCD approves it, and that provides a really good foundation of data, including census data and Department of Finance data, other additional sources, and then we supplement that with additional sources of information to make sure that we're really capturing the existing and projected housing needs in the community. We also include an inventory of land that's available for housing, and that can include vacant and non-vacant land. Where we have identified non-vacant land, we will look at each site and analyze the potential for redevelopment or the capacity for additional development there. We also look at other strategies for meeting the housing needs, including accessory dwelling unit construction and other kinds of innovative strategies that may produce some housing. Another component is an analysis of potential constraints on housing. And there's just a couple examples on the screen, but we really look at both governmental and non-governmental constraints and whether or not they really are having an impact on the ability of housing to be built there. And that can include the length of time that it takes, the cost of land, a whole variety of different components go into that. And then we have a new component, new to this 6th cycle, and that's the assessment of fair housing, which is turning out to be a very robust and thorough analysis of basically the history of all the different jurisdictions across California. All the jurisdictions are having to really delve into the development history of their community and how that has impacted housing and whether there's segregation in the community. And then also what's happening currently. Are there fair housing complaints? Is there discrimination? And then if those issues are identified, then programs are included to mitigate those, as well as with the previous bullet, if we identify potential constraints, then we're going to include programs that help to mitigate those constraints. Then another component that's pretty important is the evaluation of the previous housing element, and that's sort of like a checks and balances exercise. We look at all the things that have been accomplished or haven't been accomplished. We explain why certain things maybe weren't accomplished, maybe the market changed, or maybe those programs just need to be continued and they will be completed in the next housing element cycle. So that's where we get to the goals, policies, and implementation programs. The foundation of those are essentially a continuation of the current programs, and then we look at what needs to be changed, for example, to make sure the city is compliant with all the new state laws, and to make sure that there are adequate sites and strategies for housing, and that there are programs to encourage the development of affordable housing. So what the city can do as far as applying for grants and leveraging different funding sources, removing governmental constraints and preserving existing affordable housing, and then promoting equal housing opportunities. Next slide, please. So the regional housing needs allocation, which we refer to as RHNA, is what I'll talk about next. Next slide, please. This is a state required process that all jurisdictions throughout the state go through, and it's based on growth projections that have 8-year time horizons. So again, we want to make sure that all the local jurisdictions are planning for enough housing to accommodate households at all economic segments. We'll talk about that in a little bit more detail coming up. We have to make sure that we're identifying sites that have the appropriate zoning and identify appropriate strategies to meet this RHNA allocation. But it is not a mandate to construct homes. The city is not responsible for actually building the homes, just making sure that essentially it's getting out of the way of the market and encouraging housing for all income levels. Next slide, please. So the numbers, the allocations, the projections that start at the state level go down then to all of the different regional councils of governments. And in Emeryville's case, that's ABAG. ABAG developed a methodology then for allocating their units based on many factors. One objective is to locate new housing where there's jobs and transportation available. So that's why you can see throughout the state, a lot of very urbanized areas are experiencing large RHNA allocations, and built out communities are sometimes scratching their heads. Why did we get such a big number? But that's really the reason is to take advantage of where jobs and transportation are and are expected to be. So next slide, please. So you can see here a comparison of the numbers that were allocated to the ABAG region and to Emeryville in the 5th cycle and in the 6th cycle, and what increase that represents. The 5th cycle was developed at the time of a recession, so the numbers are a little bit low as compared with the 6th cycle. The 6th cycle was developed 2 years ago, so that was prior to the pandemic. Excuse me, and those numbers are not revised based on any factors associated with the pandemic. You can see that there was a 21% increase in the allocation for Emeryville between the 5th cycle and the 6th cycle, and that is actually not as steep of an increase as most of the other Bay Area jurisdictions. Next slide, please. All right, so I promised you technical information, and here we go. So this slide shows different income categories and the threshold of what income qualifies a household to be classified in that income category, as well as then the number of units that Emeryville's allocation has at each income level and what percent of the total that represents. So most of the time when we prepare a slide like this for jurisdictions, we use a 4-person household income. And in Emeryville, though, with the median household size being 1.81, we thought it would be more appropriate to use the income levels for a 2-person household for this particular analysis. And so what we're looking at is the incomes that households earn, and then how many new units of housing are needed at each of those different levels. So the area median income for a 2-person household is around 100,000, and the area median income for a 4-person household is at around 125,000, to put it in a little bit of context. Next slide, please. All right, so how do we plan for housing that would be suitable for the lower incomes? So HCD, they associate density with housing that would be appropriate for lower or affordable to lower income. You know, there's deed restricted affordable housing, and that's one type of affordable housing, but then there's also housing that is affordable because it can be built densely. The presumption is that with a denser housing product, then your land costs are reduced. So a developer is more likely to be able to bring something to market that is affordable. So in order to meet the RHNA allocation for the lower income housing, we don't need to have those units all be deed restricted, but they do have to be, there has to be sufficient sites with a density that's allowable, that allows a density that meets what is called the default density, and that's what the state has assigned to all the different jurisdictions. So interestingly, for Emeryville, the zones have to allow at least 20 units per acre to be deemed appropriate to meet the lower income RHNA. And that's because the population in Emeryville is less than 25,000, even though it can be considered a pretty urban location. And most urban locations, their threshold is 30 units per acre. However, let's go to the next slide. So in Emeryville, though, all of the zones that allow residential development allow at least 20 units per acre. So any of the zones that allow residential are suitable in HCD's mind for meeting the lower income RHNA categories. And we're working on the land inventory currently with staff, going through a lot of different options and thinking through these different zoning designations and different opportunities. Next slide, please. So this one shows the progress so far for the 5th cycle. And keep in mind, the planning cycle goes all the way through January 31st, 2023. So even though you see on the screen that the 1,083 units have been permitted and the target number was 1,498, there's still some time left. And furthermore, the state does not penalize cities for not meeting the RHNA as far as building production. Staff do have to report this progress to the state annually in an APR, which stands for Annual Progress Report. And staff also report on the progress of the housing element goals in this APR. So knowing this, we tailor the way that we update the goals so that they're actionable and have quantifiable objectives wherever possible for these reports. And I understand that the Planning Commission and the City Council both review and approve those APRs every year. Next slide, please. All right, new laws. Next slide, please. Okay, these two in particular are very, very new. And so we're just really learning what they're going to entail. SB 9 will allow up to 2 units on lots in single family zones. This one is probably more applicable in a community that has a lot of large lot single family homes. So we're still working out how much applicability it may have in Emeryville. AB 215, this one is a doozy because it changed the timelines for housing element review periods, including implementing a new mandatory public review time period, but it did not extend the deadline to get the document certified and adopted. So we're just having to really figure out how we're going to squeeze all of that in with the same deadline, but we have learned to roll with the punches, so we'll make it work. And actually, Emeryville is one of the first jurisdictions in the Bay Area to really be getting their housing element underway and is in a really good position to meet all of these new timelines, thankfully, since this law just passed, and we've actually been working on Emeryville's housing element for many, many months. But so next slide, please. All right, so AB 1397, this one puts some additional analysis on certain types of sites. So lower income sites that are identified, if they are non-vacant, then we have to do a little bit more analysis to show that it is presumed to be developable. And then same with sites that are smaller than a half acre or over 10 acres, we have to just do a little bit more homework to show a track record in the community of development happening on those types of sites. And then SB 166, no net loss zoning. So this one, if a project is approved on a housing element site that has fewer units or a different income category, then we have to identify additional sites. So what we do to help you comply with this law is make sure that your land inventory has a sufficient cushion so that the city has some flexibility in approving projects along the way. Next slide, please. All right, the intent of both SB 35 and SB 30 is to reduce the time it takes to approve housing developments. And SB 35 requires the availability of a streamlined ministerial approval process. And that process ensures that the proposed development meets objective standards rather than subjective judgment or discretion. It also encourages the inclusion of deed restricted affordable units. The city has received an application and approved it for 90 units at 3600 San Pablo. And then SB 330, essentially it prohibits downzoning and reduces process time and also relies on objective design standards. Next slide, please. All right, so I mentioned earlier when I talked about the components of the housing element, the new section on an assessment of fair housing. That's one of the requirements of this new law, the AB 686. So the fair housing topic actually runs now throughout the whole housing element as well, even though it has its own chapter, and it also is addressed quite a bit in the programs. But we really want to make sure we're looking at everything with the lens of fair housing. So we do analyses of areas of opportunity and access to resources. There's TCAC, which is actually the same agency that provides tax credits or administers the state tax credit program. TCAC and HCD got together to provide all kinds of data to jurisdictions in the form of different thematic maps that show where different areas of opportunity are and other kinds of criteria to help paint a picture of the status of fair housing in each community. So the lens of fair housing applies when we look at housing element sites. We want to make sure that the sites that are identified for all the different income levels are distributed throughout the city as far as having access to opportunity. We don't want to concentrate all of the sites that are identified for lower income housing in areas of low resources and lack of opportunity. We also want to identify strategies to address barriers to fair housing, and a lot of those, when we identify those barriers, those come through some of the consultations that I mentioned earlier, where we're talking to fair housing agencies. And then Anything that we can include to combat specific discrimination and displacement issues that are identified is something that's considered in the program development. Next slide, please. So now thank you. Yes, let's talk about the schedule. We've completed a lot of public participation so far. As I mentioned, we have the website, social media, and housing notification email list. We have had several housing committee meetings and have another one scheduled on December 1st. We've got those stakeholder interviews, and then we completed one community workshop in June and then have another one scheduled. We've got January identified, but we haven't set a date yet for that. So that is something to look forward to. Next slide. And yeah, that's on there for the upcoming stuff. Yeah, and then more housing committee meetings, as I mentioned, another community workshop. Tonight we have the study session, and then we've got meetings, hearings to release the public review draft, and then also to adopt the housing element. Let's go to the next slide. This is another way of looking at the schedule, essentially, and it gives a little bit more detail about the different review periods. Sometimes, and you know, this 6-cycle housing element cycle has been quite intense with the reviews have been very thorough, and the new requirements have been very thorough. And so jurisdictions across the state are just, you know, running as fast as they can to keep up with the deadlines. And so what it's doing too is causing a deluge of housing elements for the state reviewers to have to process. And so the timing is tricky. We will submit the draft to HCD, and ordinarily we're able to get a call with them to get their feedback before the deadline for their review. Their review period is mandated by the legislature, and they have to come up with a letter at the end of those statutory review periods. And the letter either has findings, which are things that need to be addressed in the document before the document can be certifiable, or they, for the initial review, they may provide a letter of conditional compliance. And sometimes we're able to get to that place by having a phone call with them ahead of the due date of their letter so that we can address their comments. But like I was saying, their schedules have been very impacted. And so we may not have that opportunity, and we may need to revise and then potentially submit the draft for an additional initial review period, and then come back and ask the city to adopt the document and then submit that final adopted version to HCD for their final certification review. So it's a lot to juggle, but we will get through it. Next slide, please. I think that is it. I'm happy to answer any questions and take any comments at this time.
Great. Thank you, Nicole. That was a good overview of all things that we have to look forward to over the next year. It looks like we have a question from Vice Mayor Donahue.
One of the points that you made was the equitable access to resources. Like, for example, we have new housing sites coming in that don't have the same equitable access to parks that other sites in our city have. Is there something about the state requirements that could somehow yield us monies to create parks where you identify housing sites?
That's a great question, and I will definitely make a note of that. I don't know off the top of my head. There may be a program to create parks, but whether or not it's tied to identifying a specific fair housing issue, that I can't say. This AB 686 is very new, and so we're really learning exactly what the state is looking for in these analyses. And then maybe once we have this housing element cycle is progressing and all the jurisdictions are identifying these are our issues, maybe things will coalesce into funding programs for issues where there's a common theme. But anyway, what Emeryville can do is work through identifying what the specific conditions are in Emeryville, and any and all types of programs to be included are definitely on the table. And so we're taking all of this input, and we can include it in an implementation program that identifies a potential area of study, or if we do identify a potential funding source for something like that, we can mention that as well.
Thank you.
Great, thank you. Colleagues, any other clarifying questions? We will now move it over to public comment, and I will ask our city clerk if anyone has submitted an electronic comment card. I do see one hand raised in the attendees box, and I will remind folks, if you would like to be recognized in Zoom, use the raise hand feature. If you're calling in, please press *9. Sherry, has anyone submitted any electronic comments?
No, they have not.
Okay, very good. Feel free to unmute the speaker and give them 3 minutes.
Okay, go ahead, please. Unmute, and you'll have 3 minutes.
Yeah, hi, I just had a question. Is there any calculation of how much it costs to provide services for these new residents? In other words, what is the cost of public safety for all residents that we're going to add, and where is that funding going to come from? Thank you.
Thank you, and I'll turn it over to staff or Nicole to see if there is a the cost of services are contemplated in this work.
Not necessarily the cost of services as far as public safety. We do look at the cost of fees, but more so through the lens of whether that is presenting any kind of barrier to development. So we itemize all the different fees that the city charges for development. I'm not sure if Charlie or Chad or Navarre has anything else they can add to that.
This is Navarre, as far as I know.
And Charlie is in the attendees box. Yeah, great. Thank you for promoting him. Go ahead, Charlie.
I know. I really just want to say I don't have anything to add to that. I believe the cost of providing services, while that is an important consideration for the city, it's not part of the mandates that we get from the state in terms of the preparation of the housing element, and it's not therefore included in our annual reports to HCD.
Great, thank you. Seeing no further public comment, oh, I see one more hand raised. I will go ahead and recognize our last speaker. Sherry, if you would, unmute them. Speaker, you'll have 3 minutes.
Go ahead, please.
Yeah, this is a question for Nicole West, and I noticed the last speaker just got their question answered, so I'm hoping I can get my question answered, so to be fair and equitable. So, Emeryville over the last 30 years, I've been paying attention to the RENAs, and we have been getting always, every RENA period, we've been getting way over 100% of our above moderate housing required for the RENA. It's one RENA period, it was over 500%. The lower and moderate income housing is usually under 100, but the market rate is always way over what the RENA suggests. And I've noticed that you don't get with the next RENA period, if you went way over your allotment of housing in a category, for instance, market rate, you don't get a credit for the next one. So it starts afresh. We have no problem getting market rate housing in Emeryville. It's always over 100%. But the problem is, we need to be able to negotiate with developers. And insofar that council members, for instance, falsely state that we need more housing when we don't, according to RENA, we lose our capacity to negotiate effectively for getting more affordable housing. In other words, if you have council members going around half-cocked, stating publicly that we have, we need more housing in in an unqualified manner. We lose our capacity, as I said, to negotiate effectively. So what can you recommend to keep council members like that in line and have them not do that and not weaken our ability to negotiate with developers to get more affordable housing?
I'm not quite sure I understand the question exactly. I'm sorry.
Can I elaborate? Will I be permitted to elaborate?
You can continue within your 3 minutes, and our clerk will let us know when you're out of time.
There was
Well,
1 minute. There was 1 minute left.
Okay, so
Starting now.
Sounds like you're not interested in hearing my question. This is a question for Penelope West. Will you let me elaborate effectively so she can answer the question?
I said you may use your allotted time, and Nicole West is here with PlaceWorks.
Yeah, I'll just be cut off. Okay, I'll start and then I'll get cut off, and then Nicole West will see what kind of city Emeryville is. So what I'm talking about is that we need to be able to have developers not feel as if their projects are slam dunks. In other words, it's good to have developers worried that they won't necessarily just get their proposal accepted, carte blanche. So if you have council members going around assuring developers that their development proposal will just be automatically forwarded, that does a disservice to us trying to get more affordable housing.
That's your time.
So I had more.
That is your time, and I will allow Nicole to respond if she chooses to. And Nicole, if you didn't understand the question, I'm afraid I can't explain it to you.
Yeah, I'm sorry. I am not sure I understand enough to be able to speak to that.
Very good. All right, thank you. Colleagues, I will go ahead and close public comment at this time and bring this back for discussion. It's under action items, but this truly is an information item because there is no action that we are taking tonight. This was meant to give us an overview and a schedule of the work that will be undertaken by council and has already been undertaken by staff, including opportunities for public engagement at Planning Commission and the Housing Committee. And we will continue to do this work all through 2022 and get this wrapped up in 2023. And as Nicole explained, there may be a double submission process. Is that right, Nicole?
It's possible.
It's possible, but we're going to play it by ear and do our best to get this done in the most efficient way possible and include all of the public participation that is required by.
And I can clarify that the double might be 2 rounds of the initial review. We definitely have a double review process if we're counting an initial review and then the certification review. So it might be a triple if we have to do 2 initial reviews, but
Got it.
It'll be okay.
Thank you, Nicole. And we appreciate all of the work that you and staff do put into this. So colleagues, is there any discussion, any questions lingering or anything folks would like to say? Member Bowders.
Thank you, Madam Mayor. I've been very excited and anticipating having this meeting, and thank you, Nicole, for your presentation and to staff for having this lined up for the beginning of this process. I would just like to see if there could be some council agreement about asking PlaceWorks and our city staff to look at several strategies as they continue the public discourse but begin developing the housing element. There's several things that have come up in the past couple of years that I've kept notes on that I think the city would be prudent to examine as ways to strategically build in capacity for us to meet our RENA goals, both in this cycle and beyond. The first is that I think that we should consider citywide zoning upzoning to quadplexes citywide. So there are currently everything is duplex eligible, and I think that when you see the direction that state legislation is going and the necessity for us to build capacity within a very small footprint, I think it would be proper to build in additional capacity to meet these very high RENA numbers that we have. We need to have space that we say we can do that. And one of the best ways we can do that is to identify some zoning changes. So I'd like to recommend first that we adjust up for quadplexing beyond duplexing in those zones that allow that. Second suggestion I would have is that to the extent that they don't currently exist along all of our transit corridors, that transit corridors be upzoned, both to maximize climate change goals and TDM opportunities, but also to just literally do housing in places that is best suited for future development. And so when I think about some of the things that have come online, and I think about the work we're doing along San Pablo and the multimodal corridor planning, we've already upzoned most of San Pablo as part of our prior actions, but we should just look at transit corridors. And then a big one for me is also, preserving the community character. And when I say that, that's like such a NIMBY trope. But to me, community character is the people who live there, who were here first. And so I'm talking about displacement and gentrification specifically. And council may recall that I had a few choice words for the developer of the 47th Street homes, who was proposing to cut a parcel in half that had a number of properties on it to avoid his affordable housing obligation. And in doing so, was also removing tenants who had been long-term tenants, minority tenants, BIPOC community members, families, grandmothers with children who had lived here for 15 to 25 years. And we were told at the time that there wasn't really much we could do because most of those things were under the rental code and under the Tenant Protection Act and not really subject to zoning or the Housing Accountability Act, some of those issues. And the Housing Accountability Act provides that we can have standards in place provided that they are objective standards. And the issue that came up was our criteria around demolition of old structures, which are inherently more accessible to BIPOC community members, lower income community members. They are longer standing community members. They provide community-based care for kids. They are a public safety asset. And I just think that we need to really ask our contract workers here at PlaceWorks to help us find the best possible language available to develop standards that will allow us to place keep for people within our community, so that if there is going to be a proposal, as we look at the implications of RENA and the need to upzone and do these things to cultivate new housing opportunities, it's really important that we have objective criteria for when a home can be torn down, right? So it's not sufficient for someone to just come and say, oh, well, the systems in this home are old. Everything gets old. It doesn't necessarily mean it's not habitable or suitable for a family. And, I think that if we had some better standards in place, then the city would be in a better position to involve itself in the potential development of a site and the protection of the people who live there. So Nicole, and I think that could also help affirmatively furthering our fair housing goals, because we have ours are lined up with the county, and I found some gaps in those. We had some very generic goals, and I'd like to see those goals be built out. And I know the city manager and other people here have a lot of experience with designing some of those components, so I have a lot of confidence in the team we've assembled on this. But Nicole, I guess my only question is just, do the suggestions I have, do those sound consistent with the things you would hope to see a city do in developing a good housing element?
I agree, those are good ideas, and I'll work with staff to talk through those. I understand the city is in the process of developing objective standards, and I think that's really great that you've identified, in particular in Emeryville, that demolition of existing structures is something that really needs attention in there. And I know you have that process underway, but if, in working with staff, if they want to ask us for any additional ideas related to that, we have colleagues at PlaceWorks who are writing objective design standards for other jurisdictions. So I can put some feelers out about, what that would look like related to demolition of existing structures. My head. And then, we'll need to look at SB9 because I'm curious how that would play out as far as the idea of upzoning anything that's eligible for a duplex to become a quadplex, how that might relate or play with SB9. So I've definitely taken a note of these and we'll look into them.
Thank you. And then the only other point I have is just back on affirmatively furthering fair housing. Like I said, we line up with what the county has traditionally done, and with no disrespect to prior housing staff who did the prior housing element, I just felt that our goals were really insufficient, and I would like to see us really have more ambitious goals as it relates to placekeeping. I take pride in the fact that Emeryville is one of the only communities in the Bay Area that increased its African American population from census to census, and that's not something we should go backwards on, and we can do that if we put the right policies in place on fair housing. So, thank you.
Any other comments?
We should look at objective shadow standards. I'm joking.
You mean taking?
Just did it for John's face.
There's, for anyone who wishes to, they can follow Lori Drosty on Twitter to get an education on how shadow studies can actually harm the process of adding adequate housing to our community. But we don't need to have that conversation here. If there are no other comments, I'll just agree with everything that Member Bowders brought up and thank him for his diligent notes. Certainly agree with upzoning to quadplexes, upzoning around the transit corridor and protecting our vulnerable populations that can be affected by displacement. So appreciate that for you bringing up all these points. This is a really good time to bring up all of these broad ideas. And I look forward to seeing how this discussion moves forward. So with that, if that ends our discussion, I will thank Nicole from Placeworks. I'll thank Navarre and our planning director, Charlie Bryant, for bringing all of this forward. And we look forward to continuing this process. So that ends action item 12.1. We have no department head reports listed unless department head jumps in right now. I'm going to move along to item 14, future agenda item requests from council members. Does anyone have any future council agenda items to request? I am seeing none at this time. That will bring us to our adjournment. And I had mentioned at the beginning of our meeting that we are going to be adjourning tonight in honor of Supervisor Wilma Chan. Supervisor Chan's legacy in Alameda County is deep and meaningful, as evidenced by her persistent leadership in supporting healthcare for all, among so many other things. In addition to her years on the Board of Supervisors, she also served with distinction for 6 years in the California State Assembly, the first Asian American to serve as majority leader. She was a champion for seniors, for youth, and families, and was particularly focused on childhood education and accessible health care for all. She was a passionate advocate and a comparable legislator who brought people together to get things done for the community. I'm sorry. For those of you who don't know, we lost Supervisor Chan, one of our Alameda County supervisors, to traffic violence very unexpectedly in the city of Alameda. And I'm sure my colleagues share my surprise, shock, and grief at this terrible loss. Many of us knew Supervisor Chan, and we've been inspired by her 40 years of public service, and she will be deeply missed. our thoughts are with her family, with her children and her grandchildren. And for those of you following the proceedings, her chief of staff, Dave Brown, was appointed to stand in her stead at the county. And I know that he will be capable in carrying on all of her initiatives and programs. These were the wishes of her family. He has promised not to run, so I appreciate that gesture from him. But she will be sorely missed. And at this time, I'd like to call for a moment of silence in honor of Supervisor Chan before we adjourn. Thank you. If anyone else would like to make any comments about Supervisor Chan, I'd invite you to do so now. I believe there will be a memorial on I'm not sure if I have the date correct, but I believe it's December 8th. And I'm sure information is widespread about that on social media. Well, thank you for indulging me in my comments. Member Bowders, go ahead, please.
I just wanted to lift up your voice and thank you for courageously talking through recognition of Supervisor Chan for all the reasons you mentioned. She served on the Healthy Homes Board with me and was an absolute champion for environmental health, in particular with a focus on children. And so I think you summarized it very well.
Thank you, and I hope we don't lose the opportunity to do her an honor by keeping our focus, as we have, on making our streets and sidewalks safe for everyone. Okay, thank you everyone, and have a good night.